Hey everyone, welcome back to Timeless Spirituality. It is time for Season 4 and the Mirror of Time home series. This season's going to work a little differently than the others have, and I will be explaining the changes as the season goes along, so all you have to do is sit back and relax for now. With that said, if you would like to book a regression with me to discover who, when, and where you have been throughout time, you can reach me on Instagram at The Past Life Regressionist or my website, thepastliferegressionist.com. And now, you know what time it is. I'm Daniel, the Past Life Regressionist, and it's time to begin.
Lift off and the clock has started.
3, 2, 1. This is Timeless Spirituality.
As a soul living on this third rock from our sun, I believe I've lived hundreds, if not thousands of different lives in different bodies, on different continents, and in different cities, countries, and civilizations that no longer exist. And in each of those lives, I believe that I formed connections with inanimate objects that meant something to me in one way or another. No different than a child having an attachment to a doll, a treehouse, or a pacifier. But what about the dwellings and shelters that kept me safe in those lives? Do those perceived inanimate objects have memories and feelings of their own? Or are they exactly as they outwardly appear to be? Lifeless. But what if there is more residing somewhere out there, somewhere among the sands of time? For someone who believes that he's lived these countless lives, you'd think that my familiarity would equate to comfort. But in my 37 years in this go-around, I don't believe any place I've ever lived has ever quite felt like home. And yes, that even includes places I grew quite attached to. In 2004, the band Green Day released a song called Boulevard of Broken Dreams, which feels like the anthem when it comes to my relationship with home. And the first verse is as follows. I walk a lonely road, the only one that I've ever known. Don't know where it goes, but it's home to me, and I walk alone. In this 5-episode miniseries, I ask the question, what is home? Or shall I phrase it in this manner? What is a home? Is it a geographical location? A place with 4 walls and a roof? An enclosed space? Or is home a person? This series is presented through a narrative of journal entries written over the course of a year, whose origins originated straight from a guy coming to terms with the imminent nature of having to say goodbye to his childhood home. Some entries are written in the past tense, and some are written in the present tense, as I wanted to see where and when in time my fingers would take me. So I invite you to sit back, relax, and join me on a different kind of journey through time in the only life that truly matters. This one. This is the Mirror of Time 5, Vagabond. Part 1, Chapter 1, January 28th, 2023. My Little Red Wagon. It's been about 2 years since my mother floated the earth-shattering idea of moving away from my childhood home. How about we call her Casa Peach, due to her original color? But now, the notion of my mom moving away is becoming more and more of a bona fide reality, as she is set to move to a new house in a new city, nearly 3 hours away in the desert of Southern California, the first week of March. Now, it's been nearly 20 years since I lived in Casa Peach, which nearly doubles the time that I physically lived there as a child. But Peach's walls hold a story, the tales of what happened for me inside and outside of that structure. But I can't blame the walls for constructing worldly events in my life, as much as I may have pounded on them in anger when I was younger. I still miss laying on the carpet in my bedroom as I created stories with my figurines. And although my mom has since replaced that carpet, I kind of like the newer one better. It's softer. My mom and I moved into that single-story, two-bedroom, 1,500 square foot house when I was 6 years old. And for the prior year, we lived in a house at the end of the cul-de-sac that was only 2 doors down. I can still remember the summer day when we walked over to Casa Peach for my mom to pick up the keys. The family who lived there was packing up their final boxes into a moving truck as their journey was about to take them to Denver, Colorado. I remember the boy with the glasses who sat at the foot of the fireplace, clutching his legs to his chest. He couldn't have been older than 12 or 13, but to me, he might as well have been damn near 40. He was so sad. And I was a little sad too. But for him, I was moving 2 doors down. He was moving to another state. I can't even imagine how difficult that must have been for a boy his age. In the previous year that we'd been neighbors, I don't ever remember seeing him until that day. And now as I look back on that encounter over 30 years later, I wonder if he had a girlfriend who he had to say goodbye to. I wonder if his California demeanor made it easy for him to make friends up in the mountains. I wonder if he's married with children now. I wonder if he's even still alive. Well, I hope he's doing well. So, with the keys in our possession, my mom and I started moving the little things into our new house. And with the sunset on the horizon and my little red wagon in tow, I walked past the roly-polies navigating their way across the driveway. And I was on my way to inhabit new walls. Chapter 2, February 4th, 2023. Cruise in the neighborhood. It's becoming more and more real. 2 days ago, my mom asked me if I'd go over to the house on February 28th between the hours of 9 and 12 to meet some delivery guys. What they're delivering, you ask? I don't know. I'm too lazy to go and look back at the text. But whatever it is, it's for the new house. So I have to be there to instruct them where to put it in the garage for when it's packed up and moved out a few days later. My mom also said to me, take whatever you want from the refrigerator or the pantry. Which brings me to my weekly dinners with Mama. I'm sad to say those weekly dinners won't be as frequent once she moves, because it's much easier for me to drive less than 15 minutes compared to the 3 hours it'll take me to get to her new house, which would be longer at dinner time with LA traffic and all. And when I leave my mom's after dinner tomorrow night, I'll do the same thing I've been doing for years. I take the long way. I like to drive around the neighborhood and reminisce on the good times I had there playing with my friends in childhood. First up, there's the paved road which goes up the hill. My little legs would struggle to get to the top when I take my bike up there, but it was totally worth it for what seemed to be a 20-minute ride back down. But it was seconds of feeling the wind on my face drying away the beads of sweat beneath my helmet. I felt alive. I felt grounded. I felt free. Next up, the somewhat newer houses on the right side of the road. Now, when I say newer, I mean 30 years old. You see, when my mom and I moved to the neighborhood, those houses were just dirt lots. But now they're the biggest houses in the community. Prior to their construction, I remember my friend's older brother and his friends doing cool BMX tricks up and down the dirt mounds. I wanted so badly to be as fearless as they were. But unfortunately, when I finally had the courage to ride on those mounds, they were gone, replaced by the houses. Next, I make my way by the community park. And I always think about the first day of school in the 6th grade when my mom took a picture of me and my friends at the bus stop. It was our first day to new school, and we were all used to walking to our neighborhood elementary school. But now we had to walk to the bus stop to go to that bigger and scarier middle school. In that picture, with my hands in my corduroy pockets, I flashed a smile of forward movement. But behind the smile, I was scared. Middle school was a big change, and I don't like change. I miss some of those days, but I do not miss my middle school years. But what's nice about that picture is 26 years later, it still sits on my dad's desk. And every time I look at it, I'm taken back to childhood innocence. If I only knew then what I know now, well, the journey wouldn't have been as interesting. Although, I sometimes do wonder how things would have been different if I knew then what I know now. Conundrums, right? Next up, exiting the gated community. Oh, wait, I think I forgot to mention that part. So, not only will I not be able to revisit the inside of my childhood home once my mom leaves, I also won't be able to revisit the neighborhood. Chapter 3, March 2nd, 2023. The Slowdown. So here we are, nearly a month after my previous entry. And there's still a lot of little to catch you up on. In the last entry, I spoke of the dinner that was set to take place the following evening. Well, it did take place, but not until February 28th. You see, on February 6th, my mom wasn't feeling too well, as she was, feeling slightly run down from all the preparation for her move. So she asked if we could postpone until the following week. Of course, I said yes. But unfortunately, I then had to postpone as I came down with the dreaded Rona. And as I went through the depths of, whatever you'd want to call it, other than the symptoms I was experiencing, there was one thought at the forefront of my mind. I'm losing time and opportunities to see my child at home before I'll never be able to go home again. This weighed on me, and there's nothing else to say. Chapter 4, February 12th, 2019. This fruit was made for blending. It was the second time I'd slept in my childhood bedroom in 15 years. The other time was a short weekend stay to dog sit for my mom when she went out of town the previous May. The morning of the 12th, pomp and circumstance unraveled itself as I had the utmost honor of having a tonsillectomy. So where better for me to go recover than my little slice of solitude from childhood? Following the surgery, it would be another week until I was able to utter a few words and 2 weeks until I could eat solid food. And after 9 days and coming in at 15 pounds lighter, I went back to my current place of residence to continue my recovery. And that's where I've been ever since. And 4 years later, I'm still recovering from another vocal surgery I had 6 months after my tonsillectomy. And 4 years later, as I look back, I see that the previous 31 years in Casa Peach, my childhood home, went by so quickly. And at the end of the day, there's no one better to take care of you when you're sick than your mother. I'm so grateful to have her in my life, and I miss that little red wagon. Chapter 5, March 3rd, 2023. To Grandma and Grandpa's house I go. Some of my greatest creative inspirations come to me while I'm in the shower. There's just something about the warm water flowing out of that shower head, streaming down my body and making its way to the drain that somehow inspires me more than, dryness. I don't understand the mechanics of the universe, so I'm not going to pretend like I do. Yet somehow when you mix red and yellow, you get orange. That's it. I'm done asking why. Anyways, I digress. While I was in the shower, I was thinking about the change. You know the one, my mom moving away. Then my attention shifted to when her mother, my grandmother, sold her house. Back in late 2014, my grandma took a bit of a fall and had to go stay in a live-in rehab for a few months. At that point, my grandfather had passed away in 2009, so my grandma had been living alone for 5 years. And my grandma is also what you may call somewhat of a social butterfly. So she was loving being surrounded by people 24/7 at the rehab facility, even if the other occupants were effing miserable. Then when 2015 rolled around, it was time for my grandma to go back to her house. And yes, I think you know what I'm going to say next. She got bored. Period. Well, I guess what I should have mentioned was prior to her fall, my grandma had been slightly resistant to move into any kind of facility where the running theme was elderly. But once she saw what was in store for her socially after her stay at the rehab facility, she was on board to give the retirement home a chance. And at this facility, they had a try it for a month special, and I'll just cut to the chase. My grandma loved it. And from the outside, in what appeared to be an on-the-whim decision, my grandma told her kids to pack her shit and sell the house. And ever since making that decision, my grandma has never looked back. Hell, she never even went back to the house she lived in for over half a century. No final walk through the halls and rooms, no standing under the skylight to see a familiar blue hue, no running her hands over the wood-paneled walls, and no final goodbye house. And that's what came to my mind today in the shower. Why was it so easy for my grandmother to say goodbye to the house she lived in for 56 years? Why was it so easy for her to say goodbye to the house where she lived and made a life with my grandfather and watched her 3 daughters grow up? And why was it so much harder for me to let go of her house than it was for her? As I write this today, it's been nearly 91 months since that early Thursday evening in mid-August when I said goodbye to my grandparents' house. I was 29 years old and dreading my upcoming 30th birthday. So there I was. The house was locked. I didn't have a key, and the new owners were taking possession the next day. I parked in the driveway, got out of my Civic, and my black lace-up Vans pressed against the hot summer ground. I was dressed in blue jeans and a white checkered short-sleeve button-up shirt. Scene set. And as I stood in the driveway, I was taken back to my 4th birthday when I tried out my Big Wheels birthday present for the first time. Back then, the roar of the battery made me feel like I was driving a sports car, and for a kid who was pushing 3 feet or so, the 2 miles per hour felt like I was going 15 to 25. Vroom, baby. The whole family was there, snapping pictures on their cameras that required film and filming on those big VHS camcorders. Vroom, vroom, vroom. Then my 29-year-old self turned around and looked at the closed garage. I was then taken back to when I was 24 and used that garage for band practice. After all, I was living in an apartment, and my grandma, well, she loved the company. Sometimes the neighbors would even come by and watch us rehearse. It was fun. Then from there, I made my way down the driveway and walked up behind the retaining wall to where the fruit trees used to bear their gifts. In that moment, I was taken back to when my grandfather and I used to go pick oranges, lemons, and grapefruits, although I was never a fan of the grapefruits. Then we'd go inside and prepare to make some juice, using their early 1960s juicing device. I still find it amazing how many oranges we had to use to make a single glass of orange juice. I mean, it was a lot. And making lemonade was fun too, especially when my grandpa would make the sugar industry very rich by filling the pitcher with their product. I miss those days. I miss childhood. I miss my grandpa. Next, I made my way back around the retaining wall and proceeded down the corridor on the side of the house, where I raised the latch on the side gate to enter the backyard. I must have stayed back there for an hour, walking in circles on the path where I learned how to rollerblade, kneeling next to the drain I was so fascinated by as a child when it would back up on those ever so elusive rainy days in LA. And then I found myself marveling at that tiny hill that I'd run up and run down as a wee lad. A hill that seemed so tall when I was so small, but now was just a few feet higher than the top of my head. There's something so special about perspective. Feeling like you're on top of the world even when the next door neighbor's house, well, it looms large overhead. When did it all change? When will the sun cease to rise and fall? When will hippos learn to fly? And why was it so much easier for my grandma to say goodbye to her house than it was for me? Chapter 6, March 5th, 2023. Dreaming of a place that's not mine. Last night I had a dream about my childhood home. In the dream, I was slightly confused to see a buddy of mine watering the plants in the front yard. I looked at him and said, "I haven't seen you in over a decade. So why are you here watering?" Then the neighbors from across the street came over and gave me a hug and asked why I was there. I looked at them confused as if to say, why wouldn't I be here? That's when they pointed towards the open garage, and there was an unfamiliar car parked inside. I looked back at them and said, I don't know what happened. It must have slipped my mind that my mom no longer lives here. Then I woke up in my bed in the room I've called mine for the last year, in the apartment I've lived in for the previous 12 years. Chapter 7, June 2006. Back to summer. Halfway through my freshman year of college, I decided I would drop out once the school year ended. Traditional school just wasn't my thing, and I'd already seen the writing on the wall if I were to continue. I'd find myself taking longer to graduate than everyone else my age. And that has always been a running theme for me ever since I was a child. Most things just take me a little longer. But on the verge of 19, I was fed up and I refused to swallow another day of marinating longer than others. If I were to leave school 3 years early, I figured I'd be the boss of those my age by the time they graduated college. Hence, I'd be ahead. Hence, for once, I'd be ahead. But unfortunately, the universe, it didn't play along with my little theory. Fast forward to late spring of 2006. At that point, I'd been living with my dad and stepmother for a year. And for the previous year, I had been working my ass off to get ahead. But working 60 to 80 hours a week finally caught up with me. I was totally burned out and I needed a change. Since I was working full time, my dad charged me $400 in rent every month, which was doable, but I wasn't happy with the career direction my life was heading in. So one day I went to him and said, I want to go back to school. His response? I had a month to find an apartment. I felt the whole thing was a little ass backwards, as he was fine with me living there while I was working full time. But when I wanted to go back to school, that's when I need to get out. Oh well. Chapter 8, mid-July 2006. My first apartment. It was move-in time. I was on my way to live in my first apartment. It was all of 500 and some square feet, but it was all mine. And to this day, I still have furniture from my first apartment. My black leather sofa, coffee table, 3 bar stools, and I'm even sitting here typing away with my laptop resting on the kitchen table from my first apartment. I don't like change. And anytime I have the slightest fleeting thought of moving to a new city, the thought creeps into my mind, what about your couch? I don't always know what it has to do with it, but I never want to part with that couch. Anyways, in the interim summer between my full-time adult job and going back to school at a community college, I went back to my old summer camp to be a counselor for a group of 9-year-old boys. And simply put, it was a fun summer. Camp was dirty, and I loved it. Even better than that, midway through the summer, I had my own apartment to come home to. So the second I walked in the door, no longer living with parents, I'd strip down in the living room and jump in the shower. Yet my clothes would remain there scattered on the floor until it was time to do a load of laundry, approximately once a week. Oh, the joys of being 20. Not only that, I was really enjoying my social life. It felt fun to be somewhat of a kid again. I'd come home, go to sleep, wake up and play outside, and do it all over again for 9 weeks. But once the summer was finished, I came home to my empty apartment. And one of the great shitty things about when I had an adult job where I worked 60 plus hours a week is that I didn't have much time for a social life. So didn't really fully understand what I was missing out on, although I kind of missed it a little bit. But anyways, when fall of 2006 came around, I realized how alone I truly felt. I stuck it out in community college for a bit, and 20 hours a week I worked at a pizza place. And when I'd come home from my part-time job, I'd be alone. I was 20 years old, and all of my friends were away at college. I felt alone. I was so sad. And not only did I feel alone, but I was alone. But then, that December, I received a call from a friend of mine who worked full-time, and he was looking for a roommate. Craving anything of a social life, I told him I was in, but not in my one-bedroom apartment. But I really liked my building, so at the beginning of January in 2007, we moved down the hall into a 2-bedroom unit, and that's where I stayed for the next year. There were some ups and downs that year. I met some new friends, and my social life started to pick up a bit, so I had that going for me. But I was also falling deeper and deeper into despair as I didn't see any prospects for my future. At the time, I took one of those career tests, and I marked highest for park ranger. That's right, a fucking park ranger. Now, as I sit here typing this piece at my kitchen table that I've had for the past 17 years, I wonder if that test would have turned out differently had there been an option for past life regressionist. Honestly, though, I don't think it would have turned out any different. Because at that time, that shit was so far from my radar. So 2007 came and went, and my lease was up. And then it was time to find a new place. But leaving that place was hard. I turned 21 while I was living there. Life wasn't great at the time, but a year and a half of my life was spent building memories in that building. Considering I was 21, that meant that everyone my age was also turning 22 that year. And 22 is typically the age when you graduate from college in the United States. Most people my age were getting ready to move on to bigger and better things. But I wasn't. The burden of uncertainty continued to weigh heavier, heavier, and heavier. And as I sit here writing this 15 years later, I can still feel the heaviness of leaving that dwelling. I still drive past it when I'm on the freeway, but all that it is now is a roadside marker on the way to and from Casa Peach, my childhood home. Chapter 9, late December 2007. Falling. As I previously mentioned, I was falling deeper and deeper into despair. And with the despair came apathy. And for a guy who loves to plan, I was uncharacteristically go with the flow for my next living arrangement. 4 of my friends were on board to lower their overall monthly payments at the house they were living in about 15 miles away from my apartment. So for $300 a month, they were going to let me stay in the garage. That's right. Captain Taurus was planning on living in a garage for the unforeseeable future. That's how low I was feeling. The idea of living in a garage seemed practical at the time. I could bore you with the rest of the details, but I'll just cut to the chase. A few days before I was set to move into a garage, I realized I was about to move into a garage. So I scrambled to find a place at the last minute. And a guy I knew had an empty room in his 2-bedroom condo. And I reluctantly moved in. I may have been in deep despair, but at least my gut feeling hadn't deceived me. He wanted me to sign a lease for a year, but Mr. Gut told me something was off, and the smart move was month to month. That living situation lasted 5 months, and then one day, I got the hell out of there and haven't looked back since. But you remember that house I told you about with my friends? Well, one of the guys went home for the summer, so I sublet his room for a couple months. I enjoyed it. It was fun to live with my friends. But once he was set to return, I'd have to depart in the fall. So I got together with another group of guys I knew, and we found another house to rent down the street. And that's where I remained for 2 years during the darkest time of my life. I really liked that house and the guys I was living with. But life was feeling heavier, and my health was deteriorating more and more by the day. But then something amazing happened while I was living in that house. I taught myself how to play guitar. Chapter 10, May 2nd, 2023. Eternal Flame. The first few days of every May tend to be a time of deep introspection for me. Some may say it's because I'm staring face to face with the yearly horizon of completing another trip around the sun. And some may be right with their assessment. But my ponderance eclipses the review of a single year, as mine becomes a recollection of revisiting my childhood through my memories. Nearly every interaction I have with objects, conscious or not, become a part of that recollection. And today, my guitar was the object responsible for the spark. For the past few days, I've been thinking about an interaction I had 2 years ago with a friend of mine. We were talking about childhood, and she asked me, what was the song that defined your earliest memories? For me, it wasn't Baby Beluga or Humpty Dumpty. Mine was Eternal Flame by the Bangles. So that's the song I strummed and sang along to today. And after a quick visual refresher with the chords for the song, I closed my eyes and let my muscle memory kick in. Subjectively speaking, the song is a musical and lyrical masterpiece. The way the chords blend the perfect mixture of majors, minors, and sevenths, then ending with a suspended second, it just gives it the most hauntingly beautiful feeling. The year was 1989, and Bengal Fever was sweeping the world with Eternal Flame topping the Billboard Hot 100 chart in the United States the first week of April, and becoming a top 10 hit in many nations around the globe, with 9 of those being number 1 chart toppers. But for me, as a young boy on the verge of turning 3, I had little to no awareness of the events, likes, and interests of the rest of the world, as my world pretty much consisted of a few friends, a nursery school, cupcakes, my parents, and my toys. But every time I think or hear Eternal Flame, I'm brought back to childhood as I remember my mom singing me to sleep with what I consider to be one of the most beautiful songs of all time. Close your eyes. Give me your hand, darling. Do you feel my heart beating? Do you understand? Do you feel the same? Am I only dreaming? Or is this burning an eternal flame? And as I now firmly enter my late 30s, the irony of the title is not lost on me. The quintessential lullaby from my childhood just happens to contain the word eternal. Kind of on brand for a guy whose life is built around the concept that our soul never dies and lives on for eternity, right? But that's the left side of my brain speaking. My ultimate takeaway? I was so lucky to have my mother there tucking me into my first big boy bed, singing me to sleep at night when I was that young child. Close your eyes. Give me your hand, darling. Do you feel my heart beating? Do you understand? Do you feel the same? Am I only dreaming? Or is this burning an eternal flame? But the innocence of childhood can fade away so quickly when we're faced with periods of our lives where we feel the flame is burning dangerously close to extinguished. And me, I'm no exception. Chapter 11, The Darkest Day of My Life.
And I'm ready, but I'm not ready. I know you know me better than I do. And I'm as curious as I'm scared of the truth. So before we begin, I just want to say thank you. And I'm ready. Yes, I'm ready. Yes, I'm ready. I'm ready.
It was summer 2008. I woke up one morning in a haze, Bed was simultaneously my prison and my reprieve. For the previous 4 months, it was becoming harder and harder for me to get out of said bed. But it wasn't simply depression. Something was wrong. But everyone was telling me I was fine. Something was wrong, and everyone was telling me I was fine. Life was bleak. I was so sad. But everyone was telling me I was fine. Everyone said I was lazy and making excuses. Wait, let me reword that. Doctors were telling me I was lazy and making excuses. Some members of my family were telling me I was lazy and making excuses. Educated men and women were telling me I was lazy and making excuses. And let's call a spade here. Am I still a little bitter? Maybe. But I'm also just telling a story. So, where were we? Oh yeah. As I laid there in bed that morning, I had one thing I was looking forward to. Leftover pizza that my roommate had offered me the night before. But yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. So a few months earlier, my health began to decline. I was in pain and more tired than I'd ever been before. Had it only been those symptoms, I may have believed the doctors when they said that I was fine. But the giveaway for me was my memory. Because 98% of the time, recalling dates, times, places, and events comes easier to me than breathing. But at the time, I was having trouble recalling what I had for breakfast, even if it was part of a routine. But why was I sad? I had great friends, a supportive family, and a brain that up until that point had worked most of the time. But my life had felt rudderless and without purpose. The system was never built for the round pegs in the square holes, such as me. Cookie cutters thrived, while those of us who lived outside the box cried. And it continued to weigh on me. It may not seem like a lot, but trust me, that weight can feel like holding the world on your shoulders. But let's rewind 2 days to when I'd been serving on a grand jury. It wasn't normal jury duty, as we had to be available for the entire month to serve on multiple cases. I was 22 and doing my duties as a citizen. And I'd say they selected me because of the content of my character, but the reality of the situation is, I was most likely selected because I didn't have anything going on at the time. Period. No excuses for dismissal. Period. And on top of that, I was selected, volunteered to be the jury foreman after no one else wanted to do it. Period. So I was the dude who sat next to the judge. Not sure how it works in every courtroom, but in this one, that was my place of residence. Anyways, a day prior, a Thursday, we were told that we didn't need to come in on Friday. 3-day weekend, whoop, whoop, drum roll please, phone, voicemail, that night, tomorrow, must come in. I'll cut to the chase. That Friday, my blood was boiling. And not due to the crime of the dude who was pretty much obviously guilty. I was pissed at my persecutor. Excuse me, the prosecutor. He was a bumbling and unprepared moron who took longer to get through a sentence than a 1980s Valley Girl. I was angry, I was sad, and I was hopeless. Still, I'm just hammering that one home for you. My mind was racing, thinking, this is a man society values? Do I have value? When a woman brings this man home, will her father only care that he's passed the bar and not give a shit that he's incapable of having a conversation about his views on the meaning of life? Yes, I know I'm making assumptions, but you weren't in that courtroom. The guy was a fucking moron and he was wasting all of our time. I was done. I gave up. I wanted to disappear, but I didn't have much in my pocket. So where would I go? So I came up with the stupidest brilliant idea that I could think of. Live off the grid on the streets. And it made sense to me for a couple hours. It was summertime, so I wouldn't have to worry about getting cold at night. So I drove to my dad's, went inside, put my wallet, keys, and phone on the table, then left a note saying something melodramatic and to the effect of, I'm leaving and never coming back. I walked out the side door and I locked it behind me. since the front door only had a deadbolt. Then I set off for my nomadic journey through the LA suburbs. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. Yeah, that didn't last long. I probably made it about half a mile before saying to myself, you living on the streets? That's a good one. So I turned back, knocked on the front door. Stepsister answered, told her I forgot my keys inside. She didn't ask any questions. I scooped them and the note up and went on my way. The rest of the night was sad. The next day was sad. The next night I went for a drive and played the same songs that I'd been playing on rotation for a few weeks. First up, 20 Years by Augustana. Well, I've been running from something 20 years in my car, down a road that's leading me nowhere. And the lyrics sighed. Next up, It's Not My Time by Three Doors Down. But it's not my time. I'm not going. There's a will in me, and now I know that this could be the end of me and everything I know. But I won't go. And the lyrics continued to sigh. And finally, Given Up by Linkin Park. I've given up. I'm sick of feeling. Is there nothing you can say? Take this all away. I'm suffocating. Tell me what the fuck is wrong with me? And the answer was, I wish I knew. That night, when I walked in the front door of my sublet living situation, one of my roommates was sitting at the kitchen table with a large pizza. He asked me if I wanted some, and of course I said, yeah. And I told him I'd come out for it in a bit. I went to my room, so sad, so tired. Then I laid down and told myself I'd go get the pizza in a minute. That would make me feel better. The pizza would make me feel better. But then my eyes closed. And now we find ourselves back at the beginning of the entry. I woke up the next morning in a haze. Bed was simultaneously my prison and my reprieve. For the previous 4 months, it was becoming harder and harder for me to get out of said bed. But it wasn't simply depression. Something was wrong, but everyone was telling me I was fine. Then the haze turned to tears, but I knew the pizza would make me feel better. It took me a while to get out of bed, but when I finally did, I made my way to the kitchen to get the pizza. But the pizza was no longer in the pizza box on the kitchen table. It was simply gone. It was there the night before, but then it was gone. When I went to bed the night before, I felt like I had one thing to live for, and it was that fucking pizza. But then it was gone. So what was the point of living? I looked around our scantily clad kitchen in all of its 1950s mustard and yellow brown glory. It was bare and empty. I wanted to die. But more than anything, I wanted to go home. Following in tow, the lonely, somber strings sang their lows. The crescendo struck and the rubber band played. Years of feeling depressed. Then the rubber band snapped and the broken band played. I threw on a pair of black oversized Dickie shorts and a black t-shirt advertising a local rock radio station. But the absolute remained. I wanted to die. I sprang out of the house and made a beeline for the garden hose. I unscrewed it so quickly, and there was no one there to stop me. So I threw the hose in my back seat and threw my car to drive on my way to my final curtain call. I wanted to go to my childhood home to end it all, but I couldn't let my mother find me that way. I couldn't be responsible for her finding her son dead from carbon monoxide poisoning. But there were other places in the neighborhood I could go that held the comfort and nostalgia. And I must add that on the drive, I obeyed every single traffic law. If the speed limit was 35, I was going 34. I was aware of the state I was in, and I wouldn't allow anyone to be physically harmed by my actions. In other words, even though the rubber band snapped, the conductor hadn't completely lost his mind. I knew where I was going, but no one could know. Because if they did, they could stop me. yet I still cried for help. I called my parents to inform them that I was out. I can only imagine what must have been going through their minds at that point. It must have been so hard for them. I don't think they fully understood what I was feeling, but I do believe they did the best they could. Just knowing they cared was enough. But fuck everyone else, I thought. I was done with this cruel world and not feeling valued. As determined as I was, I still managed to push back against myself. My will to live wouldn't give up that easily. The dichotomy was confusing to say the least. I want to live, I want to die. I want to live, I want to die. I want to live, I want to die. In my attempt to push back, I played a song that came out in 1999 titled The Warmth by Incubus. The song opens up with the sound of whale songs, and the music contains an eerie beauty of wonder written by a group of guys in their early 20s. I wanted to die, but I wasn't ready to go. So the broken rubber band continued to play. And I'd like to share the lyrics to The Warmth so you can understand the pushback. So here it goes. I'd like to close my eyes, go numb, but there's a cold wind coming from the top of the highest high-rise today. It's not a breeze because it blows hard. Yes, and it wants me to discard. The humanity I know watched the warmth blow away. So don't let the world bring you down. Not everyone here is that fucked up and cold. Remember why you came and while you're alive. Experience the warmth before you grow old. Where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? But the final two lines of the chorus were always the head scratcher. Remember why you came and while you're alive. Experience the warmth before you grow old. But how was I supposed to experience the warmth if I couldn't remember ever feeling it? So as I made my way to my childhood neighborhood, I was greeted by my first apartment building on the left. Goodbye again, I thought to myself, and fuck you for not helping me. As if the apartment cared. A mile down the road, I exited the freeway at the same exit that signified home. I took a quick left and looked at the gas station on the right and said, fuck you for not helping me. As if that made a difference. Then I proceeded past the parking lot where I first practiced driving once I received my learner's permit. Then I was mocked by the bike lane I'd ridden on so many times a few years earlier, once I was allowed to go to the movies alone or with friends. And there they were, riding right next to my car, little Daniel and whichever friend I was with. And as I kept driving, I noticed the trees in the center of the road dividing the directions. I remember them being put in when I was a child, but oh my, how they had grown in the subsequent years. And there it was on the left, my destination, nostalgia, a place I wasn't always very fond of when I was there, but it also reminded me of a time before I truly understood my lack of place in the world, my elementary school. And fuck you for not helping me, I thought to myself, as if the elementary school cared. I pulled into the parking lot and took a deep breath. There was no one there. It was summer, so school was out. I got out of my car and walked to the back of the school where the playground is located. Then I walked up and down the asphalt, soaking in the memories. Right in front of me was the handball court, and I saw my younger self through the years playing at recess and lunchtime. I walked to the field and saw the grass where my first grade class went to pick 4-leaf clovers. Then wedged up against the fence, I saw a basketball, so I went to pick it up. I walked over to the hoop, where I not only played as an elementary school child, but it's also where I came to practice before trying out for the basketball team in high school. I held the ball in my hand and thought back to all the times I had come to this very playground, even when I wasn't in school. I then cried as I realized school may be out for the summer, but there are still children who come here to play. I was still determined to end my life, but there was no way I was going to risk letting a child find my lifeless body. Even though the rubber band snapped, the conductor hadn't completely lost his mind. So I raised the basketball to the sky, watched it as it left my hand and made its way towards the hoop. Then I turned around, walked away, never looking back. Then I got back into my car, took all of 30 seconds to think of an alternative location to go to sleep for good, and then made my way to that secluded location. It was a small ravine about a mile away from my childhood home. There was a tiny service road that led down to the bottom, so I would have to carefully navigate to make sure I didn't drive off the side, as a plunge off that tiny cliff wouldn't be enough to kill me, just piss me off. There was a plethora of missed calls on my phone from my parents and therapists, but fuck it, I thought. I'm committed. But there were also some missed calls from a few friends of mine, and some of them had called more than once. At that point, a friend of mine who was out of town called, so I collected myself, picked up, and cooler than the Fonz, I said, "Yo, what's up?" He informed me that my parents had called him to see if he knew where I was. And at that moment, my world was completely turned upside down. This thing I was going through in private had now been made public. Now, I know my parents only did this out of concern, but did they actually think that I would tell my friends I was going to kill myself and then tell them where I was going to do it? An act of love and desperation on their part that at the time I viewed as a step too far. I told my buddy I had to go, and then I called my parents in a rage. I laid it out for them plain and simple. If I wasn't going to do it before, now I am. I mean, it wasn't 1979. I did have text messaging on my phone, and a simple heads up would have been nice. If we don't hear from you, we'll have no choice but to call your friends. I'd been depressed for years, but no one knew unless I told them. And at that time, I could count on one hand how many people knew. But now my cover was blown. There was no going back. And if I went back, my stoicism would now be seen for what it was, a facade. To say that I was despondent at this point, well, that would be an understatement. Any of the calm and collected feeling I may have regained on the playground had since dissipated. I can't imagine I looked attractive at the time, but who fucking cared? I was moments away from death by my hands. I reached the end of the now dirt road and turned off the engine. I looked in the rear view and wiped away the tears. But it was useless, as they were instantaneously replaced by new ones. I thought of the world and how fucked up it was. I wanted out. I thought of all those my age I'd watched pass me by. I wanted out. I thought of my declining health and how no one believed that my experience was real. I wanted out. I thought about my life, which I perceived to be a failure. And I wanted out. I wanted out. I wanted out. I just wanted to go to sleep. Then the anger kicked in. And it was the spark I needed to light the fire under my belly. I kicked the door open and jumped out. And with fury and despair coursing through my emotions, I threw the back door open and grabbed the garden hose. But it was difficult to hold, slippery from my excessive perspiration. Yet I didn't need to hold it. I just needed to get the thing out of my car. The garden hose snaked its way from the floor of my car to the ground outside. I grabbed the end of it and began to insert it in my tailpipe. But then something came over me. I let go of the hose and looked down at my hands. The sweat had picked up dirt from the ground, so my clean hands were now dirty. I stood there frozen looking at my dirty hands, but the dirt may as well have been blood. My own. I staggered around for a few seconds, looked to the sky, and collapsed to my knees. To this day, 15 years later, I still don't remember ever feeling lower than I did in that moment. I looked to my left, where I saw the summer wind brush against the leaves on the palm trees, but I still couldn't feel the warmth. I cried and I cried and I cried until all I could do was scream. Then from my knees, I fell to the floor. My breath became shallow and labored. I then closed my eyes, and a vision accompanied by calmness filled my mind. I saw myself lying there on the ground. Then I saw my body begin to move. Except in the vision, I wasn't moving it. The best way I could describe it to you is to have you imagine your two best friends lifting you up from the ground, slinging each of your arms over their respective shoulders, and helping you get back on your feet. But instead of it being your two best friends, no one is there. But something helped you to your feet. There was something I can't explain about this vision that somehow calmed me down. And then a feeling came over me that I'll never forget. And it was accompanied by a message in my own voice, but nothing grandiose. And with that, all it took was 3 words for me to get the point. You can't die. Then when all was said and done, somehow, I made it. A few months later, I found myself in a doctor's office with a medical diagnosis of autoimmune issues. So it turns out, I wasn't crazy after all. And I'm forever grateful to that doctor for listening to me and taking me seriously. And now for the kicker I know you've all been waiting for. When I arrived back to my place a short while after my visit to the ravine, 2 of my 3 roommates were there waiting for me. We sat down in the kitchen and they asked me what happened. I looked the one in the eye who offered me the pizza the night before, and I said to him, I couldn't find the pizza. I came out here this morning and it was gone. I could see the bewilderment setting in over his face. He looked over at my other buddy and they were both, perplexed beyond belief to say the least. He then fixed his attention back on me and said, I wrapped it up and put it in the refrigerator for you. Oh, I said, as I shook my head feeling like an idiot. That makes sense. Then the tension in the room eased a bit, as I'm fairly confident they knew I was going to be okay. And with that, I left the kitchen table and made my way to the refrigerator to retrieve my coveted pizza. I opened the door, and there it was, wrapped in saran wrap. Believe it or not, I chuckled to myself as I realized that the pizza was there the whole time. That summer day may have been the most difficult day of my life, but I will also remember it as the day I decided to live. To be continued.